So what pushed me to that direction was the archives itself, and then also on a personal level, it was at the beginning of 2019 that my mother passed away from an illness, and I'm an only child, so it was just me and my dad dealing with the grief. And that was the year that Tiger Woods made that comeback at the Masters. So I began to take up golf as a coping thing, just to deal with stress and get myself out there and whatnot. And I never realized how old golf was and how good it felt.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with Conor Lehr. How are you doing today, Conor?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good man, I can't complain. It's a great day. It's Friday, so it's always kind of nice to have the weekend ahead of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after a long day at work.
I believe it, man, and we'll get into it. But I know you live down in Atlanta, and driving down some of those highways, I don't miss it.
No, thankfully I was able to work from home today, but yeah, I had to drop my wife off at work, and she works at a hotel in Atlanta, so that's fun. But it was early in the morning, so I didn't have to deal too much with the traffic.
That's not too bad, man. I remember when I first moved down there, we rolled up about 3, 4 in the morning, and you think there's not going to be a whole lot of traffic, and I was I was surprised for my first time driving down there, and it was an experience to say the least.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And over the years since I moved down here, it's just gotten many more people, more crowded. It's annoying, and honestly, it's frustrating to the point where it's like, can I work outside of Atlanta? I don't want to have to drive into it.
I couldn't agree more, man. So, I like to kick off the show and talk about networking. How are we connected?
So we connected through LinkedIn. I believe it was during my grad school years that I just started looking for anyone who had experience in the archival world, and I had built my LinkedIn profile. So I started adding people, and I wanted to find people in the fields that were dealing with the stuff that I wanted to focus on once I graduated. And your name popped up, and I read your profile and all the stuff that you were doing at the time, and it sounded awesome because I think at that time you were still in Atlanta, maybe with
Yes,
the
yes,
College
I think.
Football Hall of Fame.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
yes, so we just connected from that, and ever since then, I've just asked you the occasional question. You've been very kind and helpful with your answers, and I've just seen how you've grown everything, and it's been awesome to watch.
Well, Connor, I appreciate that. Same to you, man. It's been great to see you grow throughout your career. And of course, as you mentioned in grad school, it's one of those things where I tell students or people who reach out or people who ask questions, just ask questions. So many people want to help and give their input and feedback and ways to kind of progress people. And I appreciate you for taking the initiative to reach out. And, it's kind of been cool to see your career unfold as well.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And your career is just awesome. All the stories that you've put on recently, especially, have been fantastic. And I tell all the other archivists I know about, I'm like, you need to check out this podcast. You need to follow this guy. He's just fantastic.
I appreciate it, man. So I want to know a little bit more about you. We're both archivists here. So that comic book issue number one, that origin story. Who's Connor?
So the comic book origin for me goes all the way back to New York. I was born and raised on Long Island, and ever since I was a little kid, I always had a thing for like the fantasy stories. One of the stories my dad read to me as a bedtime story was The Hobbit. So from there, began to read, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, and from there, as I was going through elementary school, we would take trips into the city, and I discovered the Museum of Natural History, and I'd look at my mom and dad and I'd be like, "Mom, Dad, that rifle's 500 years old," and they'd be like, "Yeah, it's 500 years old." And little kid, you can't ever picture something like that being that old. But as time went on, I just studied more. I segued from mythology to history in middle school, and then we moved down here for high school, and I just decided to focus on history. I took AP classes in the various histories and government classes that were allowed. And then from there, when I was focusing on college, I'm like, I want to do history. I want to utilize it somehow. I didn't think about being a teacher because I can be very boring. I bore a lot of people, so I was like, I'm not going to bore people. I'll find some way to entertain them and have them enjoy history. So I went about through college thinking I could do something with that. I was talking to a friend at one point. I'm like, all these video games we do, maybe I could be the historical reference for them if they're doing something about like the Vietnam War or something. Well, the that one company was nice when I was talking to them, but couldn't do anything with that. So eventually, after a couple of years of just bouncing back from retail to retail, I was like, you know what, I need to get some kind of bigger degree. So I reached out to he had been the special collections manager at my undergrad, but he had become the head of the archives section at Clayton State. He was the main professor. So I reached out to him asking, can I get a certification? Because I thought I didn't want to go to grad school right away because I didn't want to have to take all the exams that you had to take in order to get in. I hated the SATs. I did well enough on that, but I was like, I never wanted to do that kind of thing again. And he's like, no, we only offer graduate degrees. And I was like, oh, okay. But then he said, but we don't require those exams. I think they're a waste of time and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So he had me just write an essay showing why I wanted to enter, what I wanted to focus on, and that's how I got in. And then I went through all the years of grad school. Even before the pandemic, it was already remote, so it struck a good balance between work and between the work I had and the school I was and the school and whatnot. So it actually helped out that it was right before the pandemic that I joined because it gave something to do during that crazy time and whatnot.
I can imagine. So Connor, growing up, you were a pretty good student then.
Yeah, I was good at certain topics. I was always passionate about history. I was good with literature. I did not do good with math or science. But my parents always told me, try my best and don't stress on myself too much because I was born 3 months premature. So that's why the math and the science always comes a bit harder to me because I wasn't fully developed, and that's why I'm really good at history and literature, and that's why I can remember things like that or quotes from movie lines and random factoids like that.
So Connor, did you declare as a history major right away, or was how did that work for undergrad?
So for undergrad, I just loved history so much. I just learning the factoids, watching the documentaries, figuring out how old something was or when this republic or this kingdom was started. So I focused on that, and it was actually during my undergrad that I developed an obsession through a weird manner of the Byzantine Empire. And I just started buying as many books as I could and reading up on that because I'm like, this is over 1,000 years of human history. And it summed up to be like, oh yeah, there was an eastern half of the empire. And it's like, but it's over 1,000 years. There's so much stuff going on. There's so many people, so many poems in place, so many agricultural changes. It's just so much, and it changes how you can see the modern day world, at least in my opinion. So that's why I was obsessed with that. That's why I wrote my undergraduate thesis about that. And I knew I couldn't really probably utilize it in any way because, in addition to the math and sciences, language comes difficult to me. I can know a rudimentary bit of Spanish, but I once bought a Greek text that had the English translation on the side, and I looked at the Greek text, and I'm like, I have no idea what's being said right now. I can't read this or pronunciate this at all. But I was still thought I could still use a history degree in some way and whatnot. But and there is that one place in DC. I'm suddenly blanking on the name. Um, Dunbarton Oaks, I think is the proper way to pronounce it, and they do a lot with Byzantine history. So I thought maybe there was some way I could help with that, but it's you have to have like a PhD or something like that for the most part, and you have to be fluent in Greek, medieval Greek, which is very hard to do.
Connor, I appreciate that. I'm always curious because with history, as you, I'm sure you've talked to many historians. We all have that kind of area we find fascinating to the point where any of your friends and family start to roll their eyes because you're going to go on a 10-minute tangent about the Byzantine Empire at dinner, and no one else is listening, but you're very passionate about it. And depending on how much your loved one loves you, they'll let you talk it out. But it's always fun to see what other historians are interested in.
Oh yeah, I was when I started dating my wife, I started reading up on Philippine history, and I'm like, "Oh, Bun, have you been to this place on this peninsula, or have you seen this monument?" And literally, she'll be on her phone like, Yes, Bon, I've seen that. We've talked about that in school. I'm not very interested, but she puts up with it.
That's great, man. So you decide to go to grad school. What kind of happens after that? After you're in grad school for a while?
So while I'm in grad school, my second semester, well, right after, they offered, I don't know if they still offer there, but they offered this class where you intern with a company and you learn their archives and whatnot. And a former student who is still the archivist at Chick-fil-A corporate said to the head of the program, "Hey, if any of your students wants to come intern over the summer, I'm happy to do that." And I was the only one who raised my hand, like, "Yeah, I'll do it," because Chick-fil-A was the first job that I ever worked when we first moved down here to Georgia. So I knew the company on a base level. So I was like, that seems interesting. So I ended up doing an internship there throughout the summer, and then for the class in the fall, I just had to write about it. But that's what kind of helped shifted my focus in that I developed an obsession with sports history and wanting to work in that field because within the Chick-fil-A archives, they have obviously a lot of like W-2s, paperwork, stuff like that. But then they have always saved some of the most peculiar items. One that I loved that I tell everyone about is they made a cup in 2018, didn't properly fit the lids that Chick-fil-A gives out when you go to their restaurants with the lids, but it was this cup and it showed the history of the game between Alabama and Auburn all the way back to the 1800s. So throughout the entire cup, it just shows various decade points. And I'm like, only Chick-fil-A would be so bold to do something like that. And holy God, this game is over 100 years old. I did not think it went that long.
It's one of those interesting aspects, man. And I love the Chick-fil-A archives. I've been there. I was there quite a few times when I was in Atlanta. But one thing I always find interesting is that opportunity for networking and kind of getting your foot in the door, even anywhere. As you mentioned, it was a former grad student for me. His name's Brent Hensel. He runs the Pro Football, or excuse me, he runs the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame now, but he was
Oh,
out with the Patriots at the time doing their Hall of Fame. Our professor saw they were probably 10, 12 years apart, but on similar tracks. They got us connected, and that helped me get my internship at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So
oh,
it's real interesting,
fantastic.
just kind of that networking.
Well, especially for I think archival field, networking is the big thing because I the way I see it, most archivists, we always just want to help each other. We want to give each other tips and advice on how to preserve things, ways that things can be shown and made to the public without selling it or damaging it. Because we want this field to grow. We want to preserve everything because, especially in this modern day and age, with all the tech that we now have, everything is changing so fast that we forget that less than 20 years ago, phones could not do what they do now, or we couldn't fly unmanned, flight uh, aircraft. Essentially, everything has changed so profusely over this century, in particular, that now as archivists, we gotta show like, hey, we've made big leaps in the years. We're not slowing down necessarily, or we can't forget how we used to do things the hard way, so we can still have either that ethic, or if the tech goes down, we have this old method on how to preserve or do stuff.
Connor, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's one of those interesting fields, archival, because a lot of people, when you get a history degree, what do you do? Teach. I was an educator for a while, went into curation, went into exhibit design. So I don't think a lot of people who aren't in the history field understand that there's a wide variety of careers. So
Yeah.
what started pushing you? One, was it just the internship for the archives, or what pushed you towards that direction?
So what pushed me to that direction was the archives itself, and then also on a personal level, it was at the beginning of 2019 that my mother passed away from an illness, and I'm an only child, so it was just me and my dad dealing with the grief. And that was the year that Tiger Woods made that comeback at the Masters. So I began to take up golf as a coping thing, just to deal with stress and get myself out there and whatnot. And I never realized how old golf was and how good it felt, because I I love sports as a kid. Growing up in New York, I love the Mets. I love the Islanders still. I love them both to this day, but I sucked at it. I just wasn't very good. So that's why I segued to video games, D&D, all the typical nerd stuff because I enjoyed it and I was good at that. But in golf, you only have to battle yourself and the elements. You don't have to worry about the other person you're playing against. It's just you. So if you make four bogeys, but then you make a par, and the next day you still make three bogeys, but you make two pars, you've improved. That's how you have to look at it every day, at every time you hit a course or go to the driving range. That's how you have to look at it. And that's how I still look at it. And that's why I want to help golf grow and show it off because it's fun, it's relaxing. You can do it from the age of 8 to 88, which from a lot of sports you can't do that. So it offers a unique opportunity, and that's why I particularly love it.
Wow, and that's amazing. I'm sorry for your loss as well.
Thank you.
When
I appreciate
you
it.
when you uh when you went into the archive, you finished the internship. You
Yeah.
enjoyed it. What happened once you were done with that?
So then for that, because then the pandemic happened, because the internship was in 2019, because I started in fall 2018 with the overall grad school. But then 2020 happened, so a lot of things shut down. So I just focused on the classes, and I was working at a university library at the time. And I thought that there's enough balance between archives and library that I was still learning stuff that I could later utilize in the archival field. So went through that, ended up graduating May 2021. And then I left the library and I ended up taking an internship at this company called Heritage Works.
I was going to ask you, what was that experience like? Moving from library to a place like Heritage Works, and also, was it a contract position, or how did that work for you?
So it was different because with the library, we were subject to. I worked at Life University, which I don't know if you know that one. Um,
Oh yes.
so yeah, so we were just beholden to whoever, whatever the university wants to do during the pandemic, and basically they had us closed for a while and just hand books out through the doors if students needed them, and then when finally people were allowed back in, we just had the please sign in, wear a mask kind of deal, simple stuff, but it was pretty much like any other library to an extent if you've seen any university library. So going to Heritage Works, that was going to a corporate side of things, which felt also different from my time with Chick-fil-A corporate because we were handling so many corporations and they all had so many different, I guess, orders slash values of what they wanted their stuff done and how we kept it and what we did with it. So when I joined them, I was an intern. It was supposed to be 6 months. Well, at the end of those 6 months, my boss came to me, said, "Oh, we can extend it for another 3 months." And I'm like, "Okay, sure. I know nothing about the archival world, and I'm enjoying it well enough." 3 months go by. They're talking about moving the company to a new place in Duluth because it's out in Lawrenceville. And they say, "Oh, okay, well, we'll just give you another 3 months." So I do another 3 months, and I've essentially served a whole year as an intern. And then they promote me to contractor, which no new benefits, nothing, just the title. And so I end up working as a contractor. Now, during all this time, um, my wife at the time, she's up in Canada doing her own grad school, and the borders had been sealed during the pandemic, but then they finally open up. I go up to see her when I can, and we talk about getting married. So, in addition to getting married, I then think, all right, I need to prove that, obviously I want to prove that we truly love each other, we're loyal. So I end up enlisting in the Air Force Reserve at the base that's by our house. So I do that. I let my boss at Heritage know, like, hey, I've done this, but I did the delayed entry so that I won't go in till at this later date. I switch when they promote me. I switch from um, like the front office type of people. We deal with a lot of the digital stuff and making sure the digital archives is good and accessible to our clients. I go into the physical archives where I have to deal with the items. So I'm doing that. I get sick. At there first, I think it's just a fever, but then it gets so bad that I start to lose memory. I forget like basic things like what was my mother's favorite food, where did we go on vacation when I was a little kid. My dad takes me to the hospital, and the doctors have to perform various different inspections on me because they find out it's something that I never heard called meningitis, which is where like a fever will burn your brain or something. So I'm in the hospital for that. I get out and I have to work myself back up into shape because that was in December when I got out and I was supposed to deploy in February. And so I get myself back in shape. I'm primed and ready. The heritage comes up to me, the archivist at the time, he comes to me and says, "Hey, we'd love to make you a permanent member with full benefits." And I go, "Thank you, sir. I'm flattered, but I'm about to head out to basic training." He did not know that because my previous boss did not pass it on the line when I switched departments. So I had to explain to them, "Oh, yes, this is who I told, this is what I did." While dealing with that, the military informed me that because of my illness, I now had to get approval from the Surgeon General that I wasn't dead. So I then spent over a year not being promoted by Heritage and not hearing from the military at all. So that was a fun year right there.
Yeah, man, that's a tough because you're kind of stuck between two places, not really having an answer one way or the other. And I think a lot of things is with a place like Heritage, while they do a great job, it is difficult when you're managing so many different archival standards and practices in one building because everyone wants something a little different, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah, we had so many different clients, and they would send us so many different things, everything from physical ads, film, tapes, uh, statues, like little statues, and even a giant metal statue. Then we had to stick that one up. Wrapping that was difficult. So yeah, we literally took on everything under the sun that you can imagine, and we had so many different types of clients that I was just like, "What is this? I don't feel like we're an archive. I feel like we're the attic for anyone that wants to use us."
Man, I completely feel you there. So, kind of move on from heritage and things are going on in the military. What happened after that?
So I parted ways with Heritage. I ended up going into the military, and eventually I graduated, but they still determined that the illness had done so much, so they decided to entry level separate me, which is essentially kick me out, even though I had graduated from basic. So, right before I had been sent to training, I had interviewed with the Delta Flight Museum because one of the people at the museum, one of the archivists, was an old professor from Clayton. So I just let them know that I was coming home, and then I literally hit the ground running 2 weeks after I got back, and I've been there ever since. And yeah, it's only a temporary job. It's about a year, so June of this year is when it'll end. And my boss has already said to me, "Hey, if you ever land an interview and you're going to be late, just let me know. It's fine. I completely understand." She wants me to be able to find something, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely, Connor. And it's one of those things that I tell people getting into the field or part of the field. A lot of it is temporary positions. For example, even like Heritage, you knew it was going to be internship, but those 3 months at a time. I remember at one point I was going week to week at a place, and it was just
Yeah,
like, hey, we might have funding this week, we might not, and by the time it ends, but I think it's a testament to the passion we have for the archive field that we're willing to do that, which to a lot of people seems a little crazy, you know.
absolutely. But at the same time, especially when I was in grad school and I was reaching out to various people, part of all sorts of different organizations, I just discovered so much and how many different things can be preserved. One of the first people I connected with was the archivist for the Bacardi family. And it never occurred to my mind. I later discovered because I did a little research and then I actually found a book about it. I did not realize how old the Bacardi family was. I didn't realize how much they had saved. And I later saw pictures that she had posted on LinkedIn and whatnot. I'm like, "Oh my God, that is awesome." That stuff is like over 100 years old, but it's still, if somebody were to actually crack it open, it would still be a viable drink. They have so many different ads from the 20s during Prohibition when they were a top seller. It's like, oh my God, this is cool.
It is fascinating in that sense where you're able to find. I also people like people ask. I have my favorite areas of history, but I think there's something amazing about history in general as a field. There's so many different nuances, and as you mentioned, the Picardi family. How many people would actually know that, or even as you mentioned, as a historian yourself, you didn't even really think about how that how that could be a thing, and then you start getting in that rabbit hole of that history lesson, and it's one of those
Yeah,
fun things about the field.
absolutely. Like, I mean, if you remember during the year that I did the Chick-fil-A internship, that was the year that ESPN was doing that celebrating 150 years of college football. I'd always thought college football came after pro football. I didn't think it was vice versa until I watched that documentary, and I was like, "Wow, that's that's old. I did not realize it was that old."
It really is. And let's see if I have it right here. As you can see behind me, I have quite a bit of stuff. I do.
Yeah,
So this is the coin they gave us celebrating. So this is the commemorative coin from the 150.
very nice,
And so
very
that was
nice.
2019.
Yep.
And they gave all of us a coin, which was pretty cool. But yeah, it was fascinating to learn. So being from Wisconsin, the pro game is kind of where we're at with the Packers and all that. And
Right.
so as a kid, I was more of a pro guy. And then throughout college, wrote my undergrad on college football stadiums in the 1920s, memorial stadiums at Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota.
Right.
And so it's like it gets down the, as you mentioned, or as we were talking, gets down that other rabbit hole. If you just keep learning more and more about different subjects, you know.
Absolutely. Like one thing, one of the first trips that my family and I took when I was a little kid back in New York was we went to South Africa, and I figured we could kick out this. I discovered this, and I didn't know what rugby was, and I was like, "What is this, Dad?" And he's like, "It's if you play football but you don't have gear on." And I'm like, "You'll get really hurt then." Yeah, but they deal with it, and I was blown away because I met some locals there who played it, and they explained it to me, and I was 10 years old, so I was like, "That's so awesome." And I ended up when we got to when we moved down here for high school, the high school I was a part of was going to start a rugby program. I went out for like to have the introduction and whatnot, and I took one look around me and I'm like, I'm gonna back out. I'm the smallest guy here, and everyone's like 6'5" and 300 pounds of pure muscle, and I'm just the tiny thing. I'll just back out. But I was like, I'm glad that they're building a team because it's interesting. It's like it's just as good as pro football, if not better in its own way.
It really is, man. It's funny you mentioned that. So I played rugby in high school, and then I actually ended up writing my undergrad capstone on early American rugby and early American football and how they kind
Oh,
of
nice.
paralleled and it became American football. But I've been playing the last 16 years now, and it's funny because I have a game tomorrow. So it's one
Good
of those
luck.
things, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You know, Connor, on everyone's journey, you make a decision not really knowing the outcome. You can go east, you can go west. Can you give me a time you made a decision and went for it?
I think once I had done the internship with Chick-fil-A, I realized I would love to somehow help the sport of golf in particular, but really sports in general be grown more and shown that everyone can do it to an extent, that you don't have to be the super tall, super muscular kind of guy to do it, that everyone can enjoy it and that it can also be like a welcoming a way to welcome people in to break barriers so that you don't have to fight it out in any harsh manner. You can just play a game together and then it's like, all right, let's not argue anymore. Let's just play this game and find a balance. And that's why I want to share that history to show how long it's been a part of things and how important it can be to society and how welcoming and unifying it can be.
Connor, I appreciate that, man. I think golf is really a great symbolism, as we've talked about throughout the podcast, of kind of the battle within yourself, but also just the game and the history is amazing as well.
Yeah, it's very old. It's got so many changes, but it's still the same thing. You and a tiny little ball and fighting Mother Nature. And that's why I love it because it's just you and yourself.
So, Connor, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What do you got going on? What are you working on right now, man?
So my time with Delta is almost done, but I'm putting feelers out everywhere. I'm willing to work for any kind of archive. I'd love if I could to go up to the DC area just because there's so many opportunities with the Smithsonian. I have thought about doing government work, but with the whole Dodge program happening, a lot of people say like wait some time. So we'll see what happens. I'm having a chat with somebody next week about a place in Atlanta that has to deal with golf a lot. So we'll see what comes from that. I'm fingers crossed, but I'm not holding out hope. I'll just give my full 50 cents about it and see what it leads to.
Well, Connor, if people want to learn more about your journey, where can they find you on LinkedIn or other social media platforms?
So they can find me at Conor Lehr on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram. I'm not original with a lot of the names, really. Because if anyone wants to chat or ask questions, I'm just like I'm right here, just in the corner. So I just go by my name. I don't really come up with any weird names. I'm boring, like I said.
Well, Connor, I think you're anything but boring, man. I want to say thanks again for taking the time to talk with me today.
No, I thank you for inviting me on, Jeremy. I greatly appreciate it. I've listened to your Substack and you've talked to some really interesting people and you've helped great stories grow. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that you'll do anything big for when the Rugby World Cup comes to America in 2031? Like,
So, so, Connor, I appreciate you asking that. That was I was not expecting that, but I think one of the things is I'm fortunate working with USA Club Rugby, and I know the USA Rugby people pretty well. I would love to find a way to work somewhere in the World Cup, somewhere with that. Of course, I think the easiest answer would be to go to it, but
uh,
I,
yeah,
I would
I
love
mean,
to be a part of it. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was going to say, obviously, I want to go to a rugby game too, but I was saying, would you want to, because I have a feeling that in a way the Rugby World Cup will kind of be like what the FIFA World Cup was when it came to America in like 1998. A lot of people will go, but a lot of Americans will be like, "What is this? We don't know what this is." And that's how MLS got its start because everyone was like, "Wow, this sport is actually interesting. Let's build our own league." Do you think that by having the Rugby World Cup, American rugby will get more notice and it'll rise and grow? Do you think at all?
So my hope is it's honestly, and shout out to the women's national team doing so well in the Olympics last year, winning bronze.
Yeah,
I
I
think
saw that. That was great.
I think it's starting to grow. I think you're starting, and of course, I live in my own little delusional cocoon of rugby all the time. But it is funny because over the last about year or so, obviously since the Olympics, I've heard more people, and I've had more people from different backgrounds, not just like friends and family, other people reach out to me kind of wanting to learn a little bit more about rugby. And so I think as one of the goals of, for example, USA Club Rugby is to continue to grow the sport, but also, make it exciting and accessible for not just your hardcore rugby fan, but also those new fans, those people who, traveled to South Africa when they were 10 and learned a little bit about rugby to get them involved as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be really good. And I think once people see it, they'll see that it's really interesting. I remember I was glued watching the 2023 Rugby World Cup, especially when it was a rematch between South Africa and New Zealand. I'm like, we're having Invictus Part 2.
I couldn't agree more, man. I look forward to it. And again, thanks for talking with me, man.
Thank you for having me on, man. I greatly appreciate it.
We'll talk soon. That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.